Since the beginnings of human civilization, we constantly seek for different forms to make our days a bit funnier and to express ourselves. As time passed and technology advanced, we were able to improve all our ways of entertainment until a point in which we created a kind of interactive movie and electronic time killers, video games. Those electronic games actually generated a bunch of debates about some of them being inappropriate for some ages. So, it was created a thing called a rating system, which serves as a recommendation of which ages should be able to play a specific game. Still, there are some people who believe that the rating system should be enforced by law in order to protect the minds of children from the content of games for older ages. However, we actually believe that video games rating should not be enforced on population due to some facts such as that they are just like any other form of media, that the state can have the power to apply this, and that the rating system is still an important data for those who buy a video game. Based on it, we prepared some arguments so that we could defend our thesis and avoid the system enforcement. So, let's move on to the first.
A common argument among those who defend the rating enforcement on video games is that they are a special kind of media capable of having a deep influence over its players. But that is a misconception. Video games are by no means different from other kinds of media, like television or movies. Both of those also can have influence over its viewers, sometimes positives and sometimes negatives. All media is like that, and video games are by no means an exception. Video games can have both positive and negative effects on people. It always depends about how much influence does the people let the video games have on them. This is precisely Scott Sternberg's article's point, where he argues that the impacts of video games are largely defined simply by how people utilize them, and being such, they shouldn't receive any further enforcement or rating. Instead, rating for them should be just like rating is to other kinds of media, just a recommendation.
Also, the state cannot have the power to decide whether or not it should enforce games ratings in our society. Instead, this decision should be given to the families that are the main institution of our social corps and body. And so they need to have the power, this power of decision making in private and domestic life. Since if we would give this power, this responsibility to the state, this would be the first step to authoritarianism and our private life controlled by any governmental program. Also, families are the ones who are responsible to passing through morals and ethics to our children. So they have the notion, they have the concept of what are bad and good values. So they can filter any message that a video game contains. So they will decide whether or not a video game over the age limit of their children would be like some kind of wrong or bad for their development as a human being. Also, this line of thought can be seen in the book called "What's Wrong with the World" by an English author called Gilbert Keith Chesterton. In the book, Chesterton affirms that education is controlled by an oligarchy, by the few of the same bureaucracy, who can enforce their own experience and views without the authority of family especially. This is analogous to our situation right now, since the government also could enforce game ratings without the consent of any other institution of our social body, taking the powers of families to choose if certain video games should be allowed to their children. And this is definitely the first step to restrict our individual freedoms.
The rating explicitly tells the consumer how much violence, sexual content, profanity, and inappropriate content there is in a game. and this can help parents decide whether or not to buy a game for their children. To prove it, in a research made by the University of Nebraska, Kansas State University, and Utah State University, the effectiveness of the system was tested by over 200 families. They concluded that both parents and children agreed on the rating of the games they played, in the means that parents approved the security and accuracy of the maturity recommended, and the kids enjoyed playing the games. Not only that, but the study concludes that parents need to get caution. Since each being singular, some children might have more maturity than others, and that's a factor that changes the outcome of the results. All in all, it's recommended to check the rating before buying anything, since it's a trustworthy way to know the content that resides in a game.
In summary, after analyzing the facts listed above, such as video games being considered and looked at in the same way as any other form of media, the government inability to enforce the law, and the rating system's role to just serve as a recommendation for parents and children, we can conclude that video games ratings should not be enforced on population. Mainly because then it would be an affront to the individual liberties that America so wants and seeks to preserve since its beginnings.